December 21st, 1945. The call came into Dwight Eisenhower's office in Washington. George Patton was gone. For 3 long years, Eisenhower had walked a delicate line, publicly reprimanding his most dynamic general while privately relying on him to deliver victories no one else could achieve. He'd shielded Patton from politicians, smoothed things over with allies, and reined him in when his boldness risked international incidents. Now, with Patton no longer in the picture, Eisenhower could finally speak without weighing every word. In the weeks and months that followed, those closest to him saw a shift. Eisenhower opened up in ways he never had during the war. He acknowledged that Patton wasn't merely talented, he was one of a kind. Losing him felt like losing the sharpest edge in the Allied arsenal. If you're interested in the unfiltered truth about what Eisenhower really felt once the pressure of command lifted, stick around. Long before Eisenhower became Supreme Commander and Patton his bold field general, they were just two young officers who clicked instantly. It was 1919 at Camp Meade, Maryland. Both were captains in the fledgling tank corps. They'd spend hours dismantling engines, arguing tactics, and dreaming about how armored forces could revolutionize combat. Patton came from old money, exuded confidence, and already had battle experience from Mexico and the Western Front in World War I. Eisenhower was the modest Kansas farm kid who'd missed the fighting overseas and was still building his reputation. Yet they bonded over a common belief. Tanks weren't mere infantry support. They were the future of warfare when used aggressively and independently. The Army brass dismissed their ideas, even warning that pushing too hard could end careers. Patton, backed by family wealth, could afford to push back. Eisenhower, reliant on his salary, learned to choose his battles more carefully. Fast forward 23 years, and those two captains had risen to the top. Eisenhower as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, Patton as the most aggressive and feared American general. Their friendship endured, but the dynamic had flipped. Eisenhower now had to direct Patton's fire, manage his outbursts, explain his controversies to Roosevelt, Churchill, and Marshall, and decide when to unleash him and when to pull back. Patton chafed under the oversight. He saw Eisenhower as too political, too diplomatic, too focused on alliances instead of pure combat. He wanted to fight without compromise. That underlying tension ran through the entire war. Two men who'd once been peers now navigating a hierarchy where one held the vision and the other the raw power to make it happen. August 1943, Sicily. Leading the 7th Army during the Italian campaign, Patton visited field hospitals and encountered men suffering from what we now recognize as PTSD, back then labeled combat fatigue or shell shock. To Patton, they appeared weak. In 2 separate incidents, he slapped soldiers, berated them, and even threatened one with a pistol. Word leaked to the press. Outrage followed. Politicians demanded action. Eisenhower faced a brutal dilemma: relieve Patton and lose his top assault commander, or keep him and weather the storm. He chose a balanced response, a public reprimand. Patton was ordered to apologize personally to the affected soldiers, the medical teams, and his entire command. It was visible enough to quiet critics, but didn't destroy his career. Why the restraint? Eisenhower was already gearing up for the cross-channel invasion of France, Operation Overlord, and he knew Patton was essential to it. Not preferable, essential. Patton's performance in Sicily had confirmed what Eisenhower had long suspected. He advanced with unmatched speed, struck with overwhelming force, and shattered enemy morale like no other American leader. While British forces under Montgomery advanced deliberately, Patton's 7th Army raced across the island. The Germans quickly learned to dread his unpredictability. So Eisenhower preserved Patton's command, but at a price. He had to justify it to Marshall, Roosevelt, and the War Department, promising tighter control, no repeats, and that the battlefield gains justified the headaches. Privately, Eisenhower wasn't fully convinced Patton was entirely wrong. In off-the-record talks with aides, he voiced frustration with troops who cracked under strain. He didn't excuse the slaps, but he grasped the underlying need for discipline and resilience in combat. Patton's approach was brutal and unacceptable, but his emphasis on mental toughness resonated to some degree. Eisenhower could never voice that publicly. Spring 1944. D-Day loomed. Eisenhower needed to deceive the Germans into believing the main landing would hit Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. Operation Fortitude was born. Fake armies, bogus radio chatter, dummy installations. At its heart, George Patton. German intelligence viewed him as the Allies' most dangerous commander, based on his North Africa and Sicily exploits. They tracked his every move obsessively. Eisenhower capitalized on that fear. He placed Patton in charge of the fictional 1st U.S. Army Group, supposedly poised for Pas-de-Calais. Patton delivered speeches, reviewed phony units, posed at mock bases. Allied engineers built inflatable tanks and wooden landing craft for German recon planes to photograph. The ruse held. German reserves stayed pinned at Pas-de-Calais for weeks after Normandy, buying precious time. It worked perfectly, but it tormented Patton. He ached to lead the real assault waves. He felt sidelined, reduced to a prop while others won glory. Eisenhower couldn't reveal the full picture, that Patton's terrifying reputation was saving lives by diverting enemy divisions. Patton only learned the complete story post-war and still resented it. But Eisenhower understood. Sometimes a commander's legend wins battles before shots are fired. August 1st, 1944. Patton's Third Army activated in France. What ensued was one of the most stunning advances in modern warfare. In a single month, they covered more ground than any similar force in history, liberating countless towns, capturing or destroying tens of thousands of Germans. They moved so swiftly that enemy commanders couldn't form defenses before Patton rolled over them. Eisenhower watched with pride and concern. Pride because Patton validated their 1919 theories on mobile warfare. Concern because he outran supplies and disrupted coordination with other armies. Bradley was deliberate, Montgomery methodical to a fault. Patton simply charged ahead. He'd phone headquarters demanding fuel and ammo, insisting he could reach Berlin in weeks if given the resources. Eisenhower had to explain the bigger picture. Supplies were finite, other fronts needed priority, politics and agreements with the Soviets and British mattered. Patton dismissed it all. He saw a collapsing enemy and wanted to crush them before they regrouped. In private chats with Chief of Staff Bedell Smith, Eisenhower occasionally conceded Patton might have a point, that caution in politics sometimes slowed victory. But as Supreme Commander, he balanced military needs with alliance politics and post-war realities. He redirected supplies to Montgomery's Market Garden, which failed, forced Patton to pause, consolidate, and align with others. Patton was livid, convinced Eisenhower squandered the chance to end the war sooner. Their bond strained further. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes. Hitler's massive counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge, caught the Allies off guard. Units surrounded, lines crumbling. Disaster loomed. Eisenhower summoned his commanders to Verdun. The room was tense. Bradley appeared rattled, Montgomery cautious. Defeatist talk circulated. Eisenhower turned to Patton. "George, how soon can you attack?" Patton's Third Army was positioned 90 degrees south, committed to its own offensive. Pivoting it, 3 divisions, thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, through winter terrain to hit the German flank, was logistically nightmarish. Most would say weeks. Patton consulted his notebook. He'd already anticipated this on the drive up. December 22nd, 3 divisions, 72 hours. Skepticism rippled through the room, but Eisenhower trusted Patton's word. Do it. Patton executed. On December 22nd, his forces smashed into the German southern flank, precisely as promised. The thrust halted the offensive and turned potential catastrophe into Allied triumph. This was the payoff for all Eisenhower's patience. Every reprimand, every defense, every restraint. When crisis hit, he turned to Patton, and Patton delivered the impossible. Throughout the war, Eisenhower's public praise for Patton was measured, appreciative but never preferential, to avoid alienating Bradley, Montgomery, or the broader alliance. Privately, though, he often asked staff, what would Patton do? Not because Patton was infallible, but because his mindset cut through hesitation. Where others saw barriers, Patton saw openings. Where others weighed risks, Patton calculated speed. Eisenhower's wartime diaries show the internal conflict, needing Patton's drive yet having to curb it, valuing results yet managing fallout from his style, depending on him in emergencies yet unable to admit it openly. The war ended, and Patton quickly became a problem. His remarks on former Nazis sparked outrage. His anti-Soviet comments were explosive. The traits that won battles became peacetime liabilities. Eisenhower relieved him of command, one of his toughest calls, demoting the friend who'd turned the bulge, who'd proven their early armored visions. Their final exchanges were tense and pained. Patton felt abandoned. Eisenhower felt cornered by necessity. Then the car crash. 12 days later, Patton died. With Patton gone, Eisenhower's guarded facade slipped. In letters to confidants, talks with aides, and quiet reflections, he spoke candidly. He described how Patton achieved breakthroughs through sheer velocity, intensity, and personality, qualities impossible to duplicate. Other generals led via structure. Patton led via willpower. Eisenhower admitted some restraints on Patton had been political, not tactical, and that certain delays haunted him. Perhaps more leeway could have shortened the war. He noted Patton excelled in disorder where others faltered. In chaos, Patton thrived. Eisenhower reflected that directing Patton was his hardest command challenge, and most vital. Unchecked, Patton risked chaos. Channeled, he was unstoppable. In his memoirs, Eisenhower described Patton as indispensable to the Allied effort, an extraordinary term implying the war's course might have differed without him. He portrayed Patton as perfectly suited to war's demands, speed, aggression, relentless pressure, but mismatched for peace, where those same traits turned problematic. Eisenhower went on to the presidency in 1953, guiding America through early Cold War tensions. He never commanded in battle again, but Patton stayed in his thoughts. In later interviews, he'd recall their Camp Meade days, the tough calls of wartime management, the bulge turnaround, moments when he needed someone capable of the extraordinary. That post-death candor wasn't just about one man. It revealed the isolation of supreme command, restraining those you rely on most, balancing battlefield truth against political reality. Eisenhower had to harness brilliance while protecting it from itself and others. Only after Patton's death could he admit the toll and the worth of it all. America didn't just lose a general on December 21st, 1945. It lost a rare force who could bend chaos to victory through pure determination. Someone who shone brightest when the stakes were highest. Eisenhower always understood that. He just couldn't say it aloud until the consequences no longer mattered. What do you think? Should Eisenhower have loosened the reins on Patton more often? Or was the restraint necessary to hold the alliance together? Share your take below. And if you enjoy these deep dives into history's complex relationships and hidden truths, hit subscribe for more. See you next time.